it's Girls Camp.
Hello, campers, and welcome to Girls Camp. I'm your host, Haley Rawle, and I've had a wonderful week. I hope you've had a good week too. This week, I went on my solo trip to New York, and it was everything I dreamed it would be. I had a lot of high hopes for this trip, and honestly, it exceeded expectations. New York in May is so lovely. There was such a good energy. The weather was insane. It was perfect. And the best part of it was getting to meet up with friends that I've made through the podcast. It was so fun to chat in real life. And honestly, I was telling my husband when I got home how shook I am that real live humans are listening to this podcast. And not only that, but that the smartest, coolest humans are listening to the podcast. I was like, whoa, I'm feeling almost intimidated by some of these listeners. All just very cool people that I had such good conversations with. And honestly, one of the curses of doing this podcast is now anytime I'm having a conversation with someone about the church, which is quite often, I feel panicked that I'm not recording it. I met up with a couple women through the podcast and I was just like, I wish I was recording everything we were saying. Like, how will I ever recap this on the podcast? But I'm trying to just chill out a little bit, which is something I always need to remind myself to do. That said, Bentley does want to get me like a little portable setup so I could do more like on the fly kind of interview stuff, which I think would be really fun. All of that to say, New York was great. I also saw Book of Mormon the musical, changed my life. I'm planning on doing a full recap episode in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. One of the friends that I met up with in New York is Kadie Weber, and she is the guest on today's episode. Kadie is a transgender woman, and I know Kadie from my mission. So we actually were in the MTC together and overlapped our entire missions. And Kadie transitioned in June of last year, and she tells her whole story of what it was like growing up in the church, how she felt about all the gender constructs, how she went on a mission, got married, and then discovered that she was transgender and what that has been like for her. And it's such a lovely, inspiring, beautiful story. I think it's a really important listen. I spoke about this on Instagram a couple days ago, but there's a lot of bullshit, I think, going on in the media right now around the Target Pride merch collection. And I'm not going to get so into it, but I do just want to say, I think the antidote to this moral panic that is kind of going on right now is simply listening to stories of people in the LGBTQ community and realizing there's just nothing to be afraid of here. And I just really appreciate Kadie again for sharing herself with us. I think you're going to love it. So enjoy. Welcome, Kadie.
Thank
to
you.
Girls Camp.
Yeah, it's so great to be here. My first time at Girls Camp.
Yeah, you were, and continue to be such a supporter of the podcast, but you were like an OG camper, and I appreciate you for that from the early days of the podcast.
Yeah, I remember like your first episode. I think I listened to it like that day when it came out or something.
I'm so honored.
I was just so excited. So
it's so fun. We were talking about this. So I was just in New York. So Kadie and I were together in New York. We were going to record, and then we got kind of behind schedule, but we were talking about our mission. So Kadie and I served together. We were in the Germany Berlin mission, and we were talking about like who we've stayed connected to. And I feel like I've connected to way more missionary friends since starting the podcast than I was connected to even after the mission, which is kind of a fun, ironic little thing.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way.
It's a good connection point to have gone on a mission and then left the church. There's much to talk about.
For sure.
So today we are going to be digging into your story. Do you mind just introducing yourself, like giving kind of a general background, where you live, where you're from, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so my name's Kadie. I use she and they for my pronouns. I live in Brooklyn. I'm an underemployed software engineer right now, working on that, looking for a full-time role. So if
anyone listening, yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Let's see. I have a dog. I just got to Brooklyn like 9 months ago or something like that. I'm from Utah. I grew up in Highland, so Utah County proper. Definitely a bastion of Mormonism.
Yep.
All of my neighbors were Mormon, or at least were on the records. So every single person, every household for a couple of blocks was in my ward, and there wasn't a single one missing. Yeah,
yep, good old
crazy.
Highland.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that, especially in relation to the church, and if anything was coming up for you in the kind of childhood, adolescent years around gender identity too.
Yeah, so my family was, I'd say like firmly Mormon. I don't know how else to put it.
Devout.
There was like, devout, definitely going every week. There was some amount of like not overdoing it, like trying not to overdo it or something, like not being like true blue, like over the top Mormons, like cringy or something. I don't know. That's kind of how I felt my whole life, is like, don't overdo it. But we were like definitely like all in. And like both of my parents' families are like pioneer stock, all of that. Growing up, when I was little, I played with boys and girls, and wasn't really bothered by gender identity at all. Earliest church memory was probably like, I remember when we were all playing on the floor, like that's how little I was, of like sacrament meeting, and then all of a sudden we were like too loud one day, and that was it, and we needed to sit on the bench and try to pay attention from then on out. And
be reverent.
I was very young, and I was like, okay, now church is boring. But like
I have to pretend to listen now.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness, it was mind-numbing. It was always something I didn't really like, and it was a part of my life that like I would just forget about when I wasn't doing something churchy. I would just like focus on other things,
Do you feel like you were disinterested and like apathetic toward church, or were you like uncomfortable and feeling like any dissonance?
I didn't feel uncomfortable until I was probably around 15-ish. But up until then, I was just kind of bored sometimes. Other times I would be happy to like be involved or be a little know-it-all in Sunday school or something. Around 15 or so, maybe 16, 17 actually, in high school, like I was on the internet, and I had been on the internet before, but like I found the ex-Mormon subreddit. I was a little Redditor as a teenager. And I was on there reading stuff. So I kind of got an idea of like how people outside the church felt about it at that age. And I started to feel uncomfortable a little bit. But I was like pretty committed, and I like knew I wanted to go on a mission. That was like what I had to do as a little priesthood holder.
Yeah. That's pretty early, I feel like, to encounter. I mean, I'm imagining on post-Mormon Reddit, I'm on there now, so much later in life, but I'm imagining you were encountering a lot of heavy criticism, like historical facts, like all that kind of stuff.
For sure. So there's a lot of dissonance and a lot of, feeling like people are being too angry, too dramatic about what the church is doing wrong, and that I could just deal with the problems and, push it to the side, right? Put it on my shelf.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's when I started doing that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Interesting. That does feel earlier, especially because you were so insulated by Mormonism, living in Highland with your family and your neighbors, like you said. So yeah, I'm sure Reddit was a surprise for sure at that stage.
Yeah, no, exactly. So like, I remember I was like super analytical. I remember like deciding to go on a mission because it was like the most optimal thing to do for like living a life that kept up with like what my parents wanted or what I thought everyone around me wanted and all these things, and not being like socially ostracized or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was like, it would have been a major, like I didn't know anything else.
Totally. It just made sense to go. It's just kind of like what people were doing. So you wanted to go on a mission. You decided to go on a mission. What was the mission experience like for you?
Yeah, so I left right when I graduated high school. So no experience living away from home before that. Jumped right into it. Got to Germany. Was stuck with, a bunch of elders.
Stinky, disorganized, dirty elders.
Dirty elders, yeah. It was so fun that you stayed at Connor's apartment because you got to see exactly what he's like. Connor's our mutual friend from the mission. I got to his area after, like, when he was leaving, halfway through my mission, and it was like a breath of fresh air. He was like, he had left it all nice for me, and I was just like, what is happening?
It was like clean and smelled good. Yeah, so I stayed at another elder from our mission. I stayed at his apartment when I was just in New York, and I was telling Kadie, I was like, his apartment is so like nice and clean and smells good. It feels like a hotel. And then that's when we were talking about how you had to endure like the craziest missionary apartments on the mission.
I can't even tell you. Oh my goodness. When I first got to my very first area, my trainer had celebrated his previous companion like going home, I think. I think they made a giant oven pancake.
Yes.
And they just like left it all, like the cooking stuff, like the eggshells, full of stuff in the middle of the summer for like 2 days while he came to Berlin to come pick me up. And so I got there was like a million fruit flies in the apartment.
Oh.
It was nightmarish. So
Just
I was,
a
like, running around
warm
with the vacuum,
welcome.
sucking them up for a while. Yeah, so that's kind of how it went. Okay, so I have a funny kind of gendery story from my mission.
Yeah, please.
Where it's just like, I kind of lived for the little things that you could do. I don't know. This is like the thing that felt most like rebellious for me in a weird way. But there was a transfer, and I was getting put on a train from Dresden to Berlin, which you can do as a missionary. It's like the only time you're going to be by yourself is if you have your companion drop you off at the train station, put you on a train, and then some other companionship is going to pick you up on the other end.
Yeah.
My companion helps me get my luggage onto the train. It's very full. I'm like, I don't know what to do. It's like one of those like Harry Potter style older compartment trains, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, kind of cute.
Unusual, I guess. But like all the compartments were full. And then we noticed there's one compartment, and it was a bunch of girls from Michigan State who are doing like a exchange trip. And so my companion's like, he's like a tall, sporty guy, and he's like flirting with them. He's like, "Hey, ladies, like, what you guys are like traveling through Germany, huh?" And I was like, "Oh my god, dude!" But then he had to run off the train, and I did not have anywhere to sit. So I was like, "Hey, can I squeeze in with you guys, please?" And so they let me in, and we all just like hung out and talked for the 2 or 3 hour train ride. And it was so nice. I can't even explain it. It was just like amazing to have this little break with like 6 women who were just, excited and happy to be in Germany like I was.
Yeah.
But they didn't have to be doing a mission, It was
Yeah,
just, like, such a little relief. So that was my little thing where it was like, should I have gone and sat with all those girls and hung out with them? Yes, obviously, but like, was it a little bit of my own little rebellion? I think so.
It probably felt rebellious to be in a little compartment with all of those women. Were you feeling like any gender dysphoria on your mission? Were you feeling like any discomfort around, I mean, especially missions, they are so gendered, right?
Missions, so gendered for sure. Like, I always loved hanging out with the sisters, right? And it was like such a relief to, be a district leader and get to call a sister's companionship every night and hang out a little bit,
Yeah.
And that was a relief for sure. So just spending a little bit of time with sisters always like was great for me and made me super happy. And then I was always like a little guilty. I was like, am I like flirting with the sisters or just wanting to be their friends? Which is kind of how, a little bit of how high school went for me too. It's like having a girlfriend was a good excuse to like have girl time in a way. But I didn't know this. I just like loved being around girls. So I just thought that I was like the relationship type or something.
Totally. Yeah, that's super interesting because I didn't think about how you are stuck with another man literally 24/7. And that probably felt, as you were saying, like really restrictive.
Yeah. Not to mention the clothing.
Yeah. No, seriously. Yeah, I want to hear more about that, because I feel like you're forced to wear a suit, which is like the most masculine, I guess, you can get. I mean, I guess that's arguable. But wearing a suit every single day for 2 years, like, that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, it was awful. But in a way you get prepared for it a little bit, right? Because every week you have to be in a suit, a shirt and tie leading up to it. I feel like every kid was like this, but like I found, we were looking through some like old family videos, and you could hear my grandma like telling me like, put your Easter clothes back on, like get your tie back on, you know, like we still need to take pictures and you need to like look cute and handsome and stuff. And I was like, I know I was like really miserable wearing those clothes, because I always was. But I wasn't sitting there like, oh, I want to be in a dress. It was just like, I hate like a collar and a tie and feeling uncomfortable, you know, like I want to feel comfy. Yeah. So that's usually what I defaulted to. I was wearing like hoodies and jeans at school most of the time, you know. But then like there's little things, like I wore a hummingbird necklace to school for like all of junior year until it broke. That's sweet. Yeah, but like there was a little bit of leeway with gender. I don't know, like if you were like a cool dude, you could be like edgy and like have a little bit of jewelry or something, and not get, that's like, teased for it. Use that leeway to feel.
Were you ever teased for it, like either in high school or on the mission? Like, do you feel like people were ever like noticing things or teasing you for not maybe being like a stereotypical male, or was that not so much a thing?
No, I think I managed to steer clear of that, and just like I learned at a really young age how to conform to gender norms, because I was always wanting to do what other people wanted, right? I was a bit of a people pleaser. So it was like kind of a natural thing to not push the envelope, not feel uncomfortable. And like, yeah, it always seems like there was men who felt more comfortable with their gender and like felt like they could grow their hair out longer than me or something. And I felt weird about it. Like it was just wrong if I did it or something.
Yeah, like you didn't have as much license to do that kind of thing.
Way.
Tell me about learning about gender through the church doctrine. There's a lot about gender. There's a lot about sexuality. What was that like, learning those things as you were growing up, like up until this stage, teaching those things maybe on the mission? Were you feeling any type of way about that, or what did that feel like for you to be so steeped in the very gendered doctrines?
Yeah, I always think of the proclamation to the world, which I'm older than it, by the way, by like a month. Yeah, so you know,
you were just a little baby when it came out.
Yeah,
when did it come out? Actually, I don't even know.
Yeah, 95, early fall.
Okay, yep.
Oh, and that was all because of like some court case in Hawaii, and the church needed to be able to have its doctrine to stand on against gay marriage, right?
Ugh.
Obviously,
Yikes.
like because the church didn't have a leg to stand on and being discriminating against gay people.
So they wanted to make sure it was very clear.
Yeah, so it became like here's our written doctrine about it. So that kind of is what I grew up with, right? Is like, this thing is so important. We talk about it all the time. And, you know, men are priesthood holders, but like women are like better, you know, like I was always hearing that. And I totally ate that up because I looked at women and I always compared myself to other girls growing up. Like I thought they were the best at like doing things at school, you know, like they were smart and neat and artsy and all these things that I wanted to be like them, right? So I was like, yeah, women are definitely better. Like we were not like, men aren't better. Like men have the priesthood so they can like improve and learn to be like as good as women and all these things. So we're just like naturally great, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So that was kind of the vibe growing up. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that kind of spin on it, because that is, I think you saying that just reminded me of a lot of the like justification around women not having the priesthood is like women are inherently better, which I think
they're already good.
Yeah, they're already good. They don't need it, which obviously is problematic in so many ways. But I find it kind of like patronizing even to tell women like, well, you're so good, like us men, we're just trying to catch up, and that's why we need the priesthood. And like, you have babies and all these things that like are these kind of weird roundabout, like almost backhanded like compliments around womanhood,
upholding this weird standard that you need to be to
totally
be a woman, you know.
Totally. Yeah, but that's interesting. I can see how your perspective might be that way. And it's nice because it sounds like you had a true respect and admiration for womanhood. And even though that doctrine, I think we can both agree, is like problematic in and of itself, it sounds like you were connecting, not the doctrine, but kind of that cultural twist on it. It sounds like you were connecting to that, but in an actual like authentic sense.
Yeah, so then as I was growing up, all of a sudden I was like, wait a second, like we've never had a woman president, like no woman is actually in charge of anything in the church, like no woman presides over a single man in the church.
Yeah.
And that did take me a while to learn. I think I was really only figuring that out and why that was so awful as I was like in college, you know.
Yeah.
It wasn't something I really got as a kid.
Yeah. I can relate to that too.
Oh, I have one more mission story.
Oh, please.
I've been waiting to tell you this because I wanted to see your reaction.
I cannot wait. Please tell.
Did you ever hear about Sister German?
No.
Oh my God. Okay. So at any little district meeting, if an elder had to suffer through listening to a sister give a lesson in German, then you were liable to later hear him snidely complain about how the sister's German wasn't very good. And it would be referred to as like Schwesterdeutsch.
Okay, I kind of, now that you're saying this, I feel like I heard like whispers on the wind of that. But I remember that being a thing of like sisters suck at German.
Yeah, sisters.
But I didn't know there was like a full name for it.
Yeah, you'd be like, Schwesterdeutsch.
Icky.
You just hear that. Yeah, it made me so angry. And like there's a obvious reason why sisters aren't as good as elders at German is because a quarter of the elders have been on their mission longer than every single sister.
Yep.
Right? You have an extra 6 months of runway to just really take off in your German and then train a younger missionary and all these things are like compound. So it's like, obviously the sisters aren't here as long.
Yeah.
Like, and elders are just like, yeah, sisters are bad at German.
They're just inherently bad.
Yeah.
Oh,
and it just made my blood boil.
I hate that shit so bad. I don't know. I kind of had some of this growing up too, but I remember on the mission having to call like my zone leader, who was like an 18-year-old, like, you know, who knows who, and like reporting to this
the
boy,
football captain or something.
Exactly.
Right?
And being like, why am I reporting to you? Especially on missions because sisters are older. So you feel like there's an even larger maturity gap. And I remember it feeling so weird.
We went on the mission at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were in the MTC at the same time. But yeah, you were straight out of high school. I had gone to like a year of college. Holy I was cow. 19. So sisters are, I think, objectively more mature at that point. But yet there's still this like hierarchy where you're reporting to the men, obviously. But yeah, that sister German thing I can so see, because I think I sensed even on a mission like an insecurity among a lot of the elders, because sisters I think also have a little bit of this like, I don't know, there's a lot of weirdness around gender on missions. Something I noticed is I feel like elders would sometimes act like sister missionaries had it much easier because people were nicer to us as women, because like the wards liked us better because we were women. But in reality, I actually feel like it was a lot harder as a sister missionary to be taken seriously across the board, whether that was teaching people or in the wards or among other missionaries. But that's an interesting thing that you just unearthed for me. I've never like fully thought about that.
There's a little bit of like derision and maybe it was some insecurity there, but yeah, interesting. I always hated that.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
And the thing is there's a bunch of elders whose German was way worse than a lot of sisters. You know,
that's
like,
the thing.
That's the thing. Okay,
yeah.
Like, so, yeah. You wouldn't hear people complaining about it who were confident in their German either.
Yeah, true. Very true. Good point. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, so on the mission, you're saying you're kind of like recognizing these maybe gender things too, like you were enjoying hanging out with sister missionaries, you're feeling like not jiving maybe as much with some of the elders or elders in general.
That's it though. Yeah, that was
that's kind of the extent,
hint,
Yeah. So then you get home from your mission. So let's pick up there. What happens when you get home?
So of course I go straight to BYU.
As one does.
And then, well, I think importantly, in my first class, I meet the girl who later we got married.
In your first class?
Yeah, it was our very first class.
Whoa.
Yeah, I still remember walking in as a small class and being like, oh, there's like 3 cute girls in this class, and then there's like one who's like really cool.
And just your soon-to-be wife.
Yeah, exactly. So that all went pretty fast. We were married like a year and a half later.
Okay,
so ended up with her being 19 when we got married, which is hilarious.
Really?
Yeah.
You're dating, getting married, you get married. What's going on in relation to your faith at this point? Like, is there any deconstruction happening? How's it at BYU?
I think at BYU is kind of a weird vibe, right? So you're going to these religion classes, and then I don't know how to put it, but it just seems like there's a lot of different groups of people at BYU, and there's varying levels of like adherence to the faith and like questioning and things. So like I felt like I was in a group of people who could be kind of critical of the church, right? So it was like a normal thing to not think, it was like normal to not be racist and to not be sexist and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden later you're hearing about like, these interviews happening on campus, right? Where kids are saying just the most outlandish stuff that like I'd never heard anybody say in my circles. Yeah.
You were you were in a circle that was, I would say, a little bit counterculture, because I feel similarly when I think about my BYU experience. I mean, I heard about crazy things going on, and I could maybe sense that the majority maybe was a certain way, but the program I was in, the people I was hanging out with, I didn't encounter it super up close myself. And if anything, I was around a group of people similarly who were progressive and openly critical of the church in certain ways. Yeah. So you didn't have any major run-ins at BYU with like professors or any weirdness?
I did.
Oh, great. Glad I asked.
Well, this could be its whole own thing. But my ex was in the department where there was a professor who was sexually harassing his students, and he got let go in 2020.
Oh, damn.
That's a big thing, and there's like an ongoing court case, and he was just arraigned like this month or last month.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was like this huge deal. And so me and my ex, spoiler alert, were both like involved in this because like we had been working with him a little bit.
Wow.
So like definitely like being part of the support system for the other students as this whole thing was ongoing. She was like really involved in this. It's like this whole big fiasco.
Wow. So were you married to your ex at this time when this was all like happening?
Yeah, so we're still married. And this is right when we're leaving school, right when COVID starts.
Gotcha.
In 2020. So it's all coming to a head then.
Wow, intense.
Yeah.
What was
crazy.
What was that doing for you and your partner? Was that like causing any confusion or
tough.
Questioning with church stuff, or like how was that being internalized and
I think a little bit. I think it fit right into all of the criticisms that we were having, and it just kept getting worse. And then COVID, like we stopped going to church, and that was like such a relief for both of us because we felt awful at church, and we had for a long time, and we didn't know why. Yeah, we couldn't figure it out, but it just felt wrong all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So being able to not go to church because of COVID felt like a relief.
Yeah. And then we could kind of unpack the whole thing with the professor and all that stuff.
Yeah. When you have these people who are either, working at BYU or have callings at church that are like being put in positions of some sort of authority in the church, and shit like that goes down, it is, I think, an impetus for questioning, and also just there's a lot that you have to kind of like parse out and think through in order to
for sure
reconcile that.
Now there's a BYU is so interesting because right, all the faculty is going to be vetted by the church and all this stuff, and then you end up with these weird parallels. So he was in charge of a department, so he's kind of like the bishop of the department. People kind of just like deferred to him. People working in the department deferred to him. All the students kind of treated him like you'd treat your bishop over at the YSA ward.
Yeah.
He was the wrong guy to have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's a nightmare.
Absolutely. Wow. Okay, so tell me about deconstructing. You stopped going to church during COVID. Do you feel like you were deconstructing before that? Was that when your deconstruction started in earnest? You said you were feeling uncomfortable at church, but maybe hadn't really dug into it.
Me and my ex were both like really hesitant to talk about it with each other. That was probably one of the only parts of us that we weren't like openly sharing, was how we were really feeling about that, just because like you're not supposed to feel that way.
Yeah.
That's when I really started reading on like ex-Mormon Reddit. Like I was on there every day. It was just like part of my routine. It was like getting the
full
news
circle from the 15-year-old version of you.
Yeah, I had taken a long break. But yeah, that was coming up again for sure.
Yeah, so you were learning all the things.
Definitely learning all the things. Well, a lot of the stuff like, that's in the letter to my wife or the CES letter, all that stuff. Like there's still a bunch of it that I'd never heard of, but like, we were coming off of school and like, my ex had like taken a good course. It was kind of critical in a way of the church, of just like, it was kind of like women of the church of the Restoration.
She had taken that at BYU.
Like going in on Emma Smith really, really strongly, and it was no holds barred in a way. And
interesting.
It was shitty what happened to her.
Yeah. Yeah, very shitty. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I've talked about this before, but I feel like BYU is a weird place to be, because when you're learning about a lot of that stuff, it's surprising to me how much the religion classes at BYU actually do talk about it. Like, there's definitely a lot of professors who share it all. Totally. But when you're learning it in that environment, it's almost, at least for me, I almost found it worse than if I had just figured it out like on the internet or something, because it's coming at you with like a pre-made response. So you're like learning something, feeling uncomfortable about it, but then immediately you have like a but this or well that kind of thing going on. Yeah. How are you feeling during this time as you're, reading on Reddit, as you and your partner are starting to like open up about this? Is there like betrayal? Is there anger? Like, what were you going through emotionally?
I think there is a fair amount of anger. It is kind of how I felt a lot of my life, is just like some sort of seething, brooding, like bad feeling of just like not knowing what to say, but feeling bad in general. It was just like awful, right? And I started like really getting a little bit bitter about it, but it was a little crazy, because I didn't say I was done until Elder Holland's talk in 2021. So there was that whole year and a half of really being done and not saying I'm out, like I'm not going back. Even
just like not being ready. Yeah.
And then like I had some friends who did leave the church, and me and my ex were like, they're just so like, they just need to shut up about it, like it's so boring, like they just keep talking about the church all the time, how awful it is. It's like, we like just get over it. And it's like, okay, well, I think we need to take that step and like have it out and really just like talk about how bad it is, and then be able to move on.
Yeah. It's like a necessary step. You mentioned the Elder Holland talk. Which talk was that, and why was it your final straw?
Yeah, and so I think it's a pretty common one here. It was his response at Education Week to the gay valedictorian coming out, and I just took that so personally, even though I didn't know why, but I was just like, why are you making it like this beef with this young kid, and saying this like completely dog whistly insane, DesNat stuff in your talk that people that I'm hearing about on Twitter right now, of these crazy people who believe in blood atonement and all these things, and you're kind of just telling them to have at it in a weird way. And it's just like, it's ugh. That can't be happening. And I was just like, that's the last straw. Like, you just kicked me out of the church, basically.
Yeah.
That's how it felt.
It's like,
okay, that was you showing me the door.
Yeah, can't justify that one. That's the talk. He like referenced musket fire.
Yeah.
Like lots of not good things at all. Okay, so you talked about you have an ex, so you got divorced.
Yes.
Whatever you feel comfortable sharing, obviously, but talk us through that. What was why you got separated, and then if like the gender stuff, how that all plays in as well.
Yeah, so we basically, we both hear that talk and we're like, that's the last straw. Like, I think she was a teeny bit ahead of me, and that she was like, okay, like, I think I'm gonna stop wearing garments and stuff, maybe just like a month or two before that. And then we were both like, okay, that's it, like, we're totally done. And then that took a lot to unpack, but like that fall 2021 is when we started to think about ourselves and what we actually want. You know, like, up until that point we hadn't really been doing that.
You didn't feel like you could do that. Yeah,
it's like, and you hear about it all the time, is like people who leave are selfish and only care about themselves and all these things, and it's like, you need to care about yourself, you need to listen to your own feelings and heart and all these things. So that's when that started happening. And it ended up being a very a process that you know, unearthed a lot more things than I was expecting. That's for sure.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, well, we can do whatever we want now, so let's get high, for sure. I think that it sounds like kind of a common thing. But yeah, I think in like our second session or something, like, it was like, listen, my ex, you're gay. Like, you're a lesbian. You like girls. You don't like any guys. Like, we've been saying for years, like, you only like me. I'm the only guy that's attracted to you. But like, I think you just aren't attracted to me that much either. And like, you like girls.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much a month after we left. And then we were like trying to decide what we were going to do about that. And it just seemed unfair to leave things how they were.
Yeah.
To both of us, right? Because we just didn't know if we were actually like compatible in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked it over a lot and decided to try an open relationship, which is definitely an unsafe thing to do for a relationship, is to open it up. Like, you can like have an open relationship if you start that way, I think, but like, you're really risking it if you open up a relationship, just because it can only end in splitting up or closing the relationship again, or like somehow maintaining a balance.
Yeah.
That is a lot of work.
It increases, I feel like, the emotional complexity of a relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's when things started getting a little crazy. We both had our panic attacks a couple of times over those months. It was a lot to handle, for sure. And we were leaving the church secret from both of our families, and the open relationship secret from both of our families, which was really hard. And caused some issues for us, for sure.
Yeah, I bet. The open relationship thing, I feel like there's a stigma around open relationships, and I want to actually dig into that probably in another episode, like, specifically, but I really sympathize with couples who decide to try open relationships, because I'm like thinking about your situation. I'm sure you have deep care for each other, you and your partner. You've built a lot together. Yeah. You've built a life together. You have, you live together. You've done all these things together. And that's such a hard realization to realize, because we were in the church, you didn't have the opportunity to explore your sexuality. I didn't either. And now we're together. It's almost like a lose-lose, because it feels like we love each other. We want what's best for each other. But in order to like actually allow the other person that, or to do that, it requires a lot of change and like heartbreak, I can imagine too. So I can see maybe an open relationship feeling like a way to be able to explore some of those things you weren't able to, while still, maintaining a relationship that means so much to you. Yeah,
absolutely. Wow. Thank you. That no, I feel really understood with what you were saying there. That's nice.
Yeah, I'm glad. I just feel like people are like, open relationships, like I think a lot of people respond that way because I think it's not a thought that a lot of people, especially post-Mormons, a lot of post-Mormons have had that thought or maybe even that inclination. And I feel like there's almost an additional like, oh, I would never. But I think that I just see why that could make a lot of sense, and how, you know, it's, if you feel like you missed out on that exploration, you want to offer that to yourself and to each other, but you also like don't want to abandon your relationship. So
exactly. Like, we were, you know, we'd been married for like 4 years at the time. And it was, not something we were ready to let go of at all. We were best friends and really had a great thing going, you know, and we'd worked to integrate with each other's families and all these things. That we didn't want to let go of. But we just did not know what we wanted. So we needed to explore that. I certainly didn't know what I wanted. That's for sure.
So where did it lead? You said there was like panic attacks and anxiety.
Let's throw in some good stuff. We really met some awesome people, both of us.
Good.
It's exciting. And
good.
So like the very first person I went on a date with, this is interesting, is she had a trans partner. So I kind of was hearing about that a little bit. And thought it was so interesting, all these things. And well, you know, we've actually stayed friends. Like there wasn't really that much of a spark romantically between the two of us, but now we're like friends with each other, like good friends.
Awesome.
Which is super fun and rewarding, right? So like just that is like, we were like in the right place at the right time to meet someone who we really connected with as friends. Which is
totally. Cool. And expand your worldview, it sounds like too.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. So I was just hearing about how that was very hard for her, and I was like, but it wasn't like some foreign, unrelatable thing for me. It was something that like, I was months away from realizing that I related to her partner at all, but it was, you know, just like a little bit of exposure to that was helping me.
I can imagine.
Like, for example, it just so happened that I went to a wedding in January, while I was living in Chicago with some like coworkers of mine, and like one of my coworkers who was super, super nice to me, her spouse is a trans woman, and I got to meet her. So it was like the first trans woman that I ever met. And they're in a little lesbian relationship, and I was floored. You know, I was like, oh, I did not know that you could do this.
It was like seeing the possibility. I still didn't think about myself yet. But I was like, this is so cool. I'm so jealous of what these two have, you know? And just like, so, and like at the same time, my ex is dating girls, and I'm like so happy for her. And like, I'm weirdly not that jealous of a person, and it does work for me to, I think, have more open relationships that way, where I'm like excited to hear about people and their other partners, or like my partner, you know, having fun with other people. But like, it made me so happy to see them, and like I really felt like I kind of fit in. So that was like weirdly like something I couldn't figure out, right? So it was like a weird little mystery why I felt like so much like I wanted to be a part of the lesbian community. And I kept meeting lesbians who like, I was like, okay, I want to be just like you. And then after a few months of this, it's now last June, I finally am reading online in the middle of the night, just like about trans people. It's just like this trans subreddit where people joke about being trans, and it's just like, you know, a lighthearted thing sometimes. And I was like relating to it, and I was like, okay, well, I can't be relating to all this stuff and not like be this stuff. And that's when I kind of finally figured it out. I was like, okay, all these little things are adding up to me wanting this for myself and wanting to switch genders and be transgender. And that's what being transgender is. It's wanting to be the opposite gender. And that's when it finally clicked for me. Cool. What was that realization like? Was it overwhelming? Was there fear? Was it mostly just excitement? Like, that's a really big realization.
Lots of tears. I think I cried for the first time in months that night. And I just was like, I know what I want to do. Like, that was the coolest part of it. It's like, I know how hard this is going to be. I know how scary it is, but I know how good it sounds and how right it sounds for me. And like, it was kind of my first time figuring that out, that I wanted to do something for myself and not just like because of other people or organizations and their expectations.
Yeah, that's huge. So you feel like from that moment you had that realization, you were pretty sure, you were like, this is the route I'm going, like this feels right, this is what's right for me.
Yeah, I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like because I was kind of so uninitiated into like anything that was happening with transgender people or non-binary people or anything like that. But I was like, I'm pretty sure. And within a week, I was starting to lean towards thinking like, I probably am going to want to use she, they. And I feel like kind of like I'm outside of the gender binary, but I lean towards the feminine side of it. And I want to seem like that.
Yeah.
And then it's just solidified since then, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I have so much I want to dig into here. Really quickly, were you separated from your partner at that point?
Okay, so that was interesting. She was on a work trip, and we were when I first figured it out, and then she got back, and I told her pretty much just a couple days later, and this was all 3 weeks before we decided to separate. But we had just all these crazy things happening. We were moving, we got to the new place. She finds someone who she really vibes with, and I'm, just like, again, just like really happy for them, but it was kind of like not working with our arrangement for our open relationship. How much they wanted to be seeing each other and all these things, so we needed to make a decision, kind of. And we were both still in denial about it at the point. That point, for sure. But then we watched Mormon No More. Thanks, Sal.
Go Sal. Go Lena.
And both just like sobbed our guts out, and that's when my ex knew that it was time to end things. To move on from each other and explore our own stuff separately. So it was all a whirlwind happening in about a year ago, about last June, July.
Wow. That's a lot, because faith transition stuff, faith deconstruction is its own thing. But all of that, when you're exploring sexuality, exploring gender, you're separating from your partner of 4 years. That's a lot going on at once.
I kind of spent all day, most days, just thinking and trying to get through all of it. It was just like staring at the ceiling, journaling, just trying to work it out. It was so much effort.
It sounds like it would be. I want to hear about your experience now and what it's like to be a transgender woman, especially in relation to like your Mormon upbringing. I know that's probably something you could talk about forever, but I'm just curious, what that feels like for you, what that's been like for you, and just tell me what it's like.
It's funny because I've been living in New York for most of the time since I, realized I was trans. And I was closeted to my side of the family until either July or August, when I told my sister. And that was the first person I told. I didn't tell anybody else for months. And so I kind of was exploring myself, getting situated in New York, and like having fun with my gender, and like meeting people who I could befriend and all these things over here. And like, so I wasn't really having to navigate that very much. And like still being closeted, like nobody can really tell that you all of a sudden realize that you're going to change everything about yourself. For a lot of people's eyes. So like being closeted was interesting. Oh yeah. Well, at first I had to come out as ex-Mormon, right? I was like, okay, I need to catch my family up. I'm getting a divorce.
You're like one step at a time.
And so I kind of threw in, this is just like such a funny decision-making process, but I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to write a letter and get caught up on the fact that, me and my ex left the church like a year ago almost, and we're now separating like right now. And we had an open relationship. I might not have needed to throw that in, but that was really shocking for my family, for sure. but I sent them all a letter, and like that had a lot of fallout. I think it's interesting because actually on this podcast and on others, are like I hear people talking about leaving the church, and they often say things like coming out or transitioning, when it just in relation to leaving the church. And I always think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It's certainly a little taste of it, a little taste of like a queer coming out or a queer transition.
Oh yeah, interesting.
Very, very relatable. So I don't get bugged when I hear that kind of thing. It reminds me of how I sometimes talk about my dog when I'm trying to relate to parents of kids.
You're like, it's not the same, totally but it like kind of is. Yeah, there's similarities.
Like, oh, I know exactly what you mean. I had to get up and, take my dog out to poop 10 times last night. Yeah. It sounds a lot like what you're doing here, baby,
No, I appreciate that because that's a great analogy, because it's like, I certainly cannot relate as a straight woman, but there are similarities to the experiences, right?
You have to come out of the closet of being an ex-Mormon for sure. And it can ruin relationships, just that. And it's totally the same fear of doing it. I will say there's a lot more weight to later coming out as
absolutely.
trans.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And that's really rocked my family's world for sure. In a very interesting way. So I came out to my parents in December of last year. Yeah. And that was so scary. I've never been more scared.
I bet.
And at first it didn't go well. They like took it really hard. But they like apologized to me for kind of like not handling it well at first, and they've been trying their best, right, and putting in a lot of effort. It's weird because it seems like it's all moving in slow motion a little bit, just because we don't live by each other. We don't see each other very often, just talk on the phone. Okay, and then I did come out publicly a couple weeks ago, which was like I didn't need to wait that long. Like it was so nice. And I definitely have cultivated like circles of people who were for sure going to be supportive. I don't know why I was like worried about it.
Yeah, it's still scary. I'm sure it's still very scary.
Yeah, it's scary for sure. And I didn't know who I was going to alienate. But I definitely had just like such a great response to that. And it's been wonderful so far.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
With that being said, I am having my first little Mormon experience as an out trans person, although I look super gay at Christmas. So that was actually interesting. Like I went to my parents' ward for Christmas.
You went to church?
Yeah. Whoa. I was like, hey, what's up?
Wild.
So funny.
But you're coming up on your next Mormon experience.
Yes, which is my younger brother's getting married.
Yeah. Temple.
In the temple.
Yeah.
So that has been a whole thing to navigate.
Talk to me about it. What's it been like?
Well, it's just been funny because like I'll be talking to my sisters about like what dresses we're gonna wear and everything, and then that was tough for people to get, and I had to kind of convince everyone to get on board with me wearing a dress. Yeah. And we're just gonna see how it goes, I guess. But I feel the most comfortable in one. I think it would be silly to show up in a suit and look like a butch lesbian girl. That would be much more of a statement.
Yeah, honestly.
Than me being in a dress.
You rock that dress. I'm excited for you. But it does seem like, oh man, I have so many questions. I'm curious what it's felt like for you. Okay, here's my first question. Once you realized that you were trans, did you all of a sudden have this like whole different perspective on your whole life leading up to that point? What was that like looking back at, because you didn't know you were trans up until that exact point, right?
Yeah, I had to go do a little review, and there's still random things that come up. Like I thought of that story from my mission about the girls on the train. When I was thinking about our mission, when we were talking about this, doing this little podcast. Right. And I was like, oh, that was such like a little gender affirming thing for me. So it's fun to look back and see where maybe I did feel a little uncomfortable sometimes, and it was because of gender Or
Yeah.
maybe I felt really nice sometimes and I didn't know why, and it was because I felt my gender being affirmed.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's funny to look back and just be like, oh, there was that one random time in high school when I heard about like a little party that some girls were having, and they were like, oh, it's girls only. And I was like, but it's me. Like,
Yeah.
I can come, right? You know, I just felt like excluded.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think most guys would have felt that way.
Yeah.
I think the most obvious like physical thing for me was probably in health class in 10th grade. When we were looking at the male reproductive system, like the diagrams.
Yeah.
And there's just like all these tubes and things that I hadn't really known about. And I started feeling sick and I had to walk out of the health class because I was like pale as a ghost. I thought I was going to either faint or throw up. That had never happened to me before.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I like kept it together, got a drink, was like, what just happened? And went back in, and like someone's like, are you okay? You look like white as a ghost. And I like, I don't know, just thought maybe I was a queasy person or something. Like I didn't associate it exactly with gender, but it's because I was thinking about male genitals.
Yeah.
And the fact that I had them and I didn't like that.
Yeah, that's so interesting, like being able to put those pieces together of like things that you were, it seems like there was this intuitive sense, maybe pretty deep, but it's not until you had that realization and, you know, opened yourself up to that then you could kind of figure out what was going on during some of those times. Do you feel like stepping away from the church was critical for you in discovering that you were trans? Like, do you think you would have been able to figure that out while still in the church?
I think it was absolutely critical. There were so many things I wasn't allowing myself to think while I was in the church, you know?
Yeah.
I really don't think I would have gotten there. I mean, it took me a whole year after it took me like 9 months or something after leaving the church, after saying, I'm not going back. This is it. Like, I'm totally leaving. It took me another 9 months to figure out I was trans.
Yeah.
I think if I had stuck around, I have no idea if I ever would have figured it out. Maybe I would have eventually.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's funny because in the church, you know, or like for me growing up, like I kind of did always have these little like wanting to be trans, or like thinking about it in an interesting way that actually a lot of people didn't, but I kind of just thought it was another sinful thing that you're not supposed to think about, you know? It's like, well, it's the same as like wanting to try alcohol or something. You
just thought
but
like,
then most people don't relate to me. Yeah, it's like, I kind of want to wear girls' clothes. And it's like, well, that's probably like a sexual thing. We're not supposed to do sex stuff, so better not do it.
Yeah,
you know?
so you just like wrote it off.
Yeah,
we were talking about this at dinner in New York, and you said something that was so insightful to me about how you don't even know what you don't know about yourself sometimes when you're in the church. And I obviously can't relate to a big portion of your experience, but I feel like that's such a relatable sentiment for anyone who is post-Mormon and deconstructing, is you kind of don't realize even how much there is to explore until you're in a deconstruction phase. And to me, that just speaks to the restrictiveness of Mormonism and the boxes that it puts us in, that we're not even able sometimes to see that we want to be outside the box. You know what I mean? Like, we're just so used to those boxes that we're in and to those structures. And I feel like that was such a big thing for me when you were talking about this, to realize like, oh yeah, like sometimes we need a good amount of distance from this really prescriptive, formulaic, dogmatic doctrine in order to even allow ourselves to like figure out who we actually are. And that's on all levels, right? Gender, sexuality, and just like personality even. Like some of those things are just like off limits almost when you're just still in the church.
Yeah, I used to be a lot more sarcastic than I am now. It's very funny. But people will be like, oh, you're just being sarcastic. I'll be like, no, I actually meant that. like I was trying to be nice or something, it's like, but before, I couldn't actually say what I wanted to say a lot of the time, and I just kind of had to pretend to say it.
Yeah.
Or, like, be edgy or annoying, and now it's just like a normal part of myself. But no, I totally stand by that. I think everybody, that can find something out about yourself that you don't know yet, and you do it all the time, but maybe people who are still in the church are not letting themselves do it, and that's absolutely how I felt.
Yeah it's really sad. The last question I want to ask you is, how has it felt for you? You made the realization, you've talked about like telling your family, and that's been difficult. How has it been to go out into the world, have your new pronouns, go out into the world like as a female, have these new pronouns? Like, what has that done for you, and how does that feel for you now?
It does feel amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very scary. Every new step is scary to take, but once I get used to it, it just feels so normal and so right.
Yeah.
So like wearing makeup out or something like that, like at first it was scary, and now it's just normal. And that is just like a sublime feeling.
Yeah.
Just like feeling like this is how I just do my day.
Yeah.
Being out in public can be a little scary sometimes. It's always funny because like I live in a part of Brooklyn that's just super intense and I don't know, queer friendly.
Yeah. Good.
I'd say.
Good.
So it's very comfortable around here, and then like if I go into Manhattan, I think we were talking about this, but like going into Manhattan, like everybody feels this way, but you have to like go like look your best or whatever, or like look cool or something, you know. So it's a lot of pressure, but it's not scary. It's just that's just like such a nice thing to participate in a way. It's just like so fun to go be a person and get perceived. Can be scary at first, but it's part of being human.
Well, I'm so happy for you. I'm really, really grateful that you're willing to share all of this. I feel like society in general, and the church specifically, I don't know, I almost feel like there's still like an intense level of like mystification maybe around gender and the transgender experience, and
for sure
I just like don't think it needs to be that way. And I know that your willingness to tell your story and like share your heart and share who you are is just such a huge piece of demystifying the whole experience, right? And like you said, there's like, I think every listener will relate to a lot of what you said, and then will learn a lot from what you said about, what that experience is like. And I think that's what we need in order to understand each other better and love each other better. And I just really appreciate you being willing to do that, because particularly in Mormon spaces, like there's just a lot of stigmas and a lot of, prejudices that are just really, really shitty. And a big mission of this podcast is just, even though we've left that behind, I do think, unfortunately, there's still a lot of deconstruction around different things that we need to do as post-Mormons, because we grew up learning these things about different people, and it's
absolutely,
there's still like so much deconstruction that needs to be done. And I think hearing stories like yours is just a huge part of that. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. No, I'm so glad to have joined you. This is the perfect place to share. I think you're totally right about, demystifying, right? And that's what I had to do, is right, like I was kind of saying, is like I had to meet trans people before I could figure it out, right?
Yeah.
So I think everybody has to meet a trans person for them to really realize that a trans person is just a person, and they're just a regular person like anybody else, right?
I was talking about this with Sal from Mormon No More, of like just everyone paving the way for each other, even in small ways, like the trans women that you were able to meet and how they paved the way for you, and the trans women who were writing their stories on Reddit and how that like contributed to your story, and now you're sharing, and that's gonna like help someone else. I just think it's such a cool chain effect that
It's really cool.
Always just like makes me feel stoked on humanity, which
it's great.
Yeah.
And it's similar to, you know, there's that connection again. It's very much like leaving the church.
Yeah.
Right? You have to get to know somebody who's left
Totally.
a little bit before you can
Totally.
you can realize that it's possible for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're the best. I can't thank you enough. So you are on Instagram as one Caden Weber, right?
Yes, that's right. Exactly.
I'm sad we didn't get a cute selfie that I could put on my Instagram.
It's too bad.
But I will make sure to add your handle to the show notes and on Instagram. So if anyone wants to find you, that's where they can find you.
Yeah. Feel free to reach out for sure. I'm very happy to meet you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kadie. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your Sunday.
You too. Yeah, enjoy.
Bye.
G-I